If we can get to 15,000 subscribers by the end of the year, I'm going to give away a layout. Up to $5,000 in value. I will help you design it. I will build it. We're going to get started today by putting the track back in place, and then we're going to get to wiring. Okay, so now that I have all of the track put back in place, I'm going to start taking the wire ties off of the switch control wires, and then I'm going to clip the ends off of all of them. Now this isn't normal procedure, but I will not actually be using the Kato controls. If you are planning on using the Kato controls, just remember that the hole you drill underneath the track does need to be large enough for this plug to fit through. I believe it's a 3/8 or 1/2 inch drill bit. So one thing I do like to do when I am clipping these off is I will on occasion save a piece and I'll leave an inch or two just in case I do need one of these for any other situation. It's come up in the past. Isn't it great how the wires just disappear? And you know, see what I mean? It's just, you line it up just inside that edge where you know it is because you marked it with a pencil, and then it just disappears when you push the switch over. Next up is going to be power feeders, and I'm actually going to be using Kato's unit joiner terminal feeders. Basically I'm using these because, well, I'm being lazy. Important thing to know on these is they're kind of expensive, but they're really easy to make yourself. So if you are building a large layout, it is better to go ahead and make them, and I'll show you how to do that in a future video. But for now, because of this layout and how long it's taken me to get to this point, I'm going to go ahead and use these. Now, one cool thing about these unit joiners is, at least buying the kit anyways, every single one of them comes with this little tool. And this is the same thing for both their HO and their N scale track. So you're just going to take it with the indentation pointed out and stick it up underneath the track, and then pull sideways and it pulls the joiner right out. And then to snap them back in, it goes right back in quick and easy. Okay, now that I got all of these out, I'm going to do a couple more pieces of prep. I'm going to go ahead and take the wire ties off of these. I'm actually going to save these wire ties though, because they work out great to help tie up the wire underneath the layout once you start getting it installed. So I'm going to go ahead and untie them, stretch them out, and then again I'm going to clip off the ends because I won't be using them for this layout. Okay, so now that I got all of the wires unbundled, I want to talk to you a little bit about my color pattern. So every time I do a Kato layout, it's always white out. So the color white always goes towards me. Now obviously you'll have to pay attention if you have any reverse loops on your layout, but I've found that personally it makes it easier to keep track of things. I don't miswire or crosswire the layout in any way. However, there is a trick to make sure you don't crosswire, absolutely, and I'll show you that here in just a second. Okay, so this is called a voltmeter, and it's got an interesting function. Now this one's from Radio Shack, which is defunct, but you can pick these up for about 12 bucks on Amazon. You see the little spot there that kind of looks like a little speaker? Well, if you set it to that, it's a resistance. So what this tells you is if there's a dead short. So in this case, a dead short. So what I can do is I can actually plug this into the end of the track, and if there's a short, it will actually make a tone. So I'll do that again over here. So when the switch is thrown, there's a dead short at the moment because this other switch over here isn't thrown. If I threw both of them, then it would work properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up on one of these pieces of wire, and I'm just going to plug it into the end of the layout. So what this means is if any of my wire connections underneath the layout get miswired, this thing is going to tone. It's going to tell me, hey, you screwed up. You need to fix that. So, and what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and pop out this connector here. And I'll go ahead and I will plug this in to the end of this track. Now, it's not going to stay here. It's not permanent, but it provides a solid connection that I can go ahead and attach my voltage meter to, and it'll tell me whether or not I have a short. Now, one thing I will tell you about these multimeters is if you're working on a layout over a multiple days, turn it off when you leave. Otherwise, the battery will go dead. It won't make the tone, and then you'll be 30 connections down the line before you remember to turn it on. And then you'll get that dreaded beep when you turn it on. So let's try and avoid that. So I'm going to go ahead and start pulling connectors and start getting the wires in underneath the layout. So another thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be installing isolators. Now, in this case, they're black, but there's a little itty bitty piece of plastic between it, which actually keeps the rails separated. So in this case, I know I want to put an isolation point here because I want the ramps to be separate from the rest of the layout. So I've got all the wires in now. I don't have any of them connected right now, so it kind of just looks like a hanging rat's nest at the moment. But it'll soon make sense. What I've got going on is I've got this track segment's going to be able to shut off. Remember, I'm going to put these joiners in after the rest of the underside is wired to make sure there's no conflicts. I've got this section is going to be isolated as well, so you can park an engine here, turn the track off. This layout is going to be DC, however, it will be DCC friendly if he does decide to upgrade later on. So I've got a track isolator there just past the switch. And that, as you'll recall, goes to the ramp up. And then there's another section right here. So what I'm doing is I'm isolating the ramps themselves from the rest of the switches. So if there is a conflict, we can go ahead and disconnect those two ramps, and then we can just work with this set of switches or this set of switches, and it makes it a lot easier to debug. So, and then on the back section, I've got one set of isolation points here. And then the second set is up here. Again, just the ramp is isolated. It makes it easier to debug things. And then finally, this upper section right here, I've got an isolator right here. And what that's going to do is it's going to take this section of track here, and I'm going to be able to turn this entire section on and off. So I've got wire connections going here, 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 and here. So 4 sets. All of those will be tied together underneath the layout, and then they'll be brought back to a switch panel, which will probably sit somewhere right about here, and that will be able to turn off all 3 of those tracks all together. So now that we have the wire pulled through the Benchwork, I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about how I'm wiring it. So I've gone ahead and I've actually color-coded the track plan. And so I've got a couple different things going on. I've got this big splice right here. And what this is it's just a older style computer wire joiner. You can get these on Amazon. I've got a 9 here, and then this is a larger one. There's a 15 connector. So this particular one, the larger one, is actually going to be all of my switches. So everything that's red-black underneath the layout is actually going to get connected to this big plug right here. And then this half of the plug will actually be on the back side of the control panel, while this will stay with the layout. Now, this isn't really going to be a situation in this particular layout because I'm actually going to ship it assembled, but you know what this would allow you to do is this would allow you to build the layout, build the control box separately, and then bring the two together, which is exactly what I'm going to do. So what you see me here doing is I'm joining all the wires where I know I can, and I'm basically just eating an elephant one bite at a time. I'm taking one chunk, putting all the pieces together, and then bringing it back to the plug that's ultimately going to be plugged into the back of the control panel. So I wish I could actually solder this fast, but this did actually take several hours. Okay, so now I've got the controller in place. I've tested all of the switches. They all work like they're supposed to. So I actually don't have to do any rewiring in the control box, which is great. So all I gotta do is put the rest of the screws in for that. And then next up for this layout, keep in mind that I still haven't glued the track down yet. And there's two important reasons for that. The first being is I want to make sure that if anything needs to be adjusted, it can be. For example, I had a piece of straight track over here, which was a little bit too long, and it didn't leave me with enough room for the bumper. So I went ahead and swapped that out, so now a bumper will fit. Same goes for the other sides. The other thing that's really important with this is you have to test all of your track. And even though Kato is a fantastic track system, I can't recommend it enough. Every once in a while there is a manufacturing issue, and I did actually find one. So when I started testing this layout, this is a little DC/DCC locomotive, unlabeled. I buy these tiny little locomotives specifically for testing layouts like this, because if there's going to be an issue, you're going to find it with the little ones. The longer locomotives tend to ride over the little track issues. So the one thing I did find is this particular switch up here, it wasn't actually assembled correctly. So when I went to go throw the switch, it would only go about halfway, and then it wouldn't go back the other direction. So I took it all apart, and the little wire that's inside of it that throws the switch wasn't connected. I put it all back together, put it back on the layout, and started running the train over it, and it would run through fine one direction, but if I flipped it the other direction, dead short. Well, unbeknownst to me, the little plastic nub that slides back and forth, which actually changes the polarity of the frog on the switch, actually had come loose as well, so I had to take it back apart again. Now, on the plus side, these Kato switches, the wires are actually screwed on, so I could actually remove the switch entirely, fix it, and then put it back together on the layout without any issues. So this is why I go through and test all of the track thoroughly before I glue it down. So one thing to note, that when you are building a layout like this, especially in these conditions, you want to make sure that you clean the track very, very well before you start running your engines, even when you're testing. So what I typically like to use is rubbing alcohol. Rubbing alcohol is fairly available. It's getting more available now. But that combined with an old t-shirt, a cotton rag, something that doesn't have a lot of fuzzies. So you don't want to use paper towels, for example, because they'll actually get caught between the little nubs on the track, and you'll end up having to clean that as well. So otherwise, this track is pretty much ready to go. It does work. Keep in mind, I haven't run this a whole lot, and I haven't run a professional track cleaning object on it yet, but the train works. I've got my scale trains box car going behind it. Oh, looks like I went a little too far. Let's go the other direction. And then I'm going to go ahead and throw that switch. Now I'm going the direction I want to go. So right now it's running with an N-scale power supply, so it's going to run a little bit slower. You can do that on purpose, or you can actually upgrade to the HO scale. The only difference being is the N scale goes to about 12 volts, whereas the HO scale power controller, or the power brick anyway, goes to 16 volts. So it'll go a little faster. Okay, so to connect the track to the Benchwork, I'm going to be using a silicone adhesive And rather than actually sticking it in the middle of the track segments, I'm going to be putting it at the track joints. So anywhere there's a track joint, I'll put a dollop of silicone. And what that does is that catches it on the spot that has the most surface area closest to the benchwork, and it secures it very well. And the beauty of silicone is this peels right off. So if you do end up making track changes, you could just use a putty knife and scrape underneath there. It takes a little bit of effort, but once you get the track up, you can actually grab a hold of that piece of silicone and just give it a yank, and as it stretches, it'll pull away from the plastic. So it makes it completely reusable. It doesn't affect the track in any negative way, and then it is fully secured. So for me, I'm just going to glue this down, and then in 2 or 3 days time, I'm going to box this up and I'm going to ship it to Michigan. Well, this sadly marks the end of this series, but if you've liked the videos, please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment down below. I really do read all of the comments, and I want to know what you want to see next. And last but not least, don't forget, once we hit 15,000 subscribers, I'm giving away a layout. See you on the next video.